If you're a fan of representation, maybe you've heard of a series called Star Trek Discovery. It is a sci-fi show within the Star Trek franchise that started airing in 2017. It currently has 3 seasons, and the third season started airing towards the end of 2020. This series, over the years, has done a great job of representing different kinds of people. People of color, women. The main character is actually a black woman. There is even a gay couple, a lesbian character. Also, Star Trek Discovery has continued the legacy of its predecessors of coding some characters as neurodivergent, and there has been a little bit of physical disability representation. It was announced that for the third season there would be 2 trans characters that would be joining the cast. This was, of course, wonderful news because positive trans representation is still very rare in mainstream media, and to have 2, not even 1, but 2 trans characters on a show that is as popular and as well known as Star Trek was really something good. The third season has recently concluded, and I've watched everything, and I have some thoughts that I want to share about the representation, but I'll also talk a little bit about the series itself. So let's go. Depending on who you ask, you might get different opinions on whether this was the first time Star Trek has actually done trans representation. Because in the past, in different series in the past, there have been different instances of alien species sometimes functioning as a possible metaphor for transgender issues. And some people consider that already trans representation, even though it's not discussed in human terms. The possible most popular example of that is the episode The Outcast from The Next Generation, where the crew of the Enterprise meet an alien species called the Janai, who all seem to be genderless. There is, of course, some conflict, and that is what the episode is about, but this is kind of, the genderlessness could be seen as a metaphor or analogy for non-binary people, and then the main Janai character wants to be more perceived as female or as a woman than genderless, but the society doesn't agree with that, so it's kind of, it could be seen as a reverse for what non-binary people go through in our current society. But this would be the first time that trans representation would be on Star Trek in terms of having a trans actor play this character and gender issues be discussed not through a metaphor or an analogy of an alien species. So the third series is started with the crew of the Discovery jumping through time 900 years into the future following the events of the second season. And the character of Adira is introduced in the third episode, where they are a part of a group who come onto the Discovery to investigate. The second trans character is introduced in the next episode as Gray, the boyfriend of Adira, who is dead. Adira and Gray are part of that, mostly the fourth episode's plotline. Adira has a symbiont inside of them, which has been passed on from Gray, who was a Trill. And I'm not going to go into the details of that story because it's not very important. It is for the series, but not right now. That's kind of it. They're part of that episode's story, the plot, and then it gets sold and they get information on where to find the Federation next. There is no discussion of gender of either of the 2 characters, except for a few really strange sentences that kind of emphasize that other people use she, her pronouns for Adira, but it just, that didn't sound like foreshadowing or anything. It just sounded like someone didn't know how to write dialogue properly, which is not something that you want. And if I didn't know that these characters were supposed to be trans, there is nothing that would tell you that. At certain points, I also thought that it is possible that some people who did not see the news of there being 2 transgender characters in the new Star Trek series could consider the 2 a straight couple, because Gray is the binary trans character, but he's just gendered male, and Adira is, everyone uses she, her pronouns for them. I can see how their relationship could be seen as a straight one. I started to distrust the show. I was wondering, were these characters actually trans? Were they actually going to be revealed to be trans? Are they just going to be trans on the inside, but no one's going to talk about it? Or is it going to be connected to this whole Trill symbiont host thing? Because we know that Gray was a Trill, and Adira then took over the symbiont that Gray had. Trills have been used as metaphors for trans characters in the past, so I was wondering, are they going to pull the same thing? Did they say that there was going to be trans representation and they're just going to pull the same card as multiple shows before that? It kind of fueled this distrust of the show that I've had in also the previous series. Yeah, there is just a lot that this series is inconsistent in, and this was just one of the things that piled up on it and made me kind of scared and not very excited for the series overall. However, we did get a coming out. On the 8th episode of the series, well over half of the series, we get a sort of coming out from Adira, where Adira talks to Stamets, a gay man that has his husband on board the ship, and Adira says that they prefer they-them pronouns. And Stamets says, sure, of course. Adira says that they've only told Gray before that. And that's kind of it. There's not really any discussion. You know, it's good that it was not made to be a big deal. I could have imagined they could have gone with Stamets going, oh, what? Why? Or whatever. It's also good that it's not connected with the symbiont thing. Adira says that they felt like they preferred they-them pronouns even before they got the symbiont, so it's, not connected to that, which is good in my opinion. But still, there was no discussion of it whatsoever. I believe that we're at a point in time where trans issues should still be discussed as many times as possible in as many different environments, and this felt like a good environment to discuss issues of gender in this kind of future, a little bit post-apocalyptic, but it's in space, but still that has been a big tragedy that has changed the lives of many people, and also it is 900 years in the future, so a lot of things have changed. So I thought it would be a really good place to talk about trans issues. Also, we could see how they could incorporate trans people into this society of the future, but they just kind of didn't. I feel like I understand where they were coming from. They didn't want to make it a big deal. They probably just wanted to make it like low-key, like, oh yes, this character is trans and whatever, let's just move on, which, is great, but I wonder if someone who doesn't really know that much about trans issues saw that, would they realize that this character is non-binary? What would they think if someone just said, I prefer they-them pronouns? Maybe they wouldn't really realize. Maybe, not maybe, I'm completely wrong. Maybe everyone would get it. But, it's just, I still feel like we should talk about gender issues, non-binary issues, trans issues as much as we can to kind of spread the education and stuff like that. Also, with the representation itself, I feel like the two characters, Gray and Adira, were a little underdeveloped. Definitely Gray because he was dead, and he would appear only a few times as a person that only Adira could see because of the symbiont situation, and then appeared a little longer in the last episode. He didn't really have an opportunity to show what kind of person he is. And Adira also, I just think Adira was underdeveloped. I couldn't tell you what kind of person Adira is. Like everything, all the conflicts, everything that Adira was part of was them doing something behind someone's back, and they are a genius, and they have these struggles with Gray because Gray is basically dead and they only see him because of the connected situation. But I couldn't tell you what kind of person they are really. They're just underdeveloped, and I don't think it's because of I don't know, of some conspiracy that they didn't want the non-binary character to be important, whatever. I just think that Star Trek Discovery in general tries to do too many things and doesn't properly dive into any of them. It just wants to introduce a bunch of new cool things to wow the audience, but then doesn't go and actually go deep and make this thing like really cool. They're just like, oh, look at that. Wow, great. Moving on. Next thing that you look at. So I feel like possibly they did the same kind of with the representation. Like they wanted to be like, oh, look, we have a non-binary character and we have a binary trans character. Great. Okay, moving on. Story. Yeah. And possibly that's why they also didn't dive really deep into the gender issues, because they just thought that people would get it, or it didn't seem as important to them to dive deeper into it and to explain it, because they really don't explain that much in the whole show. Yeah. I would love to see the non-binary actor kind of adding their experience into the character, them having input into the gender expression of their characters. But no, I'm not even getting into the whole there's a queer relationship and one of them is dead. There was like a foreshadowing that might change. There might be some way to, I don't know, extract the consciousness of Gray from the symbiont and make it into, I don't know. There was some foreshadowing, but still, it's not good to start off with that, with having a queer relationship and one of the partners being dead. That's, yeah. I also want to talk a little bit about the last episode of the series, because that was personally an episode that I enjoyed much better than many other episodes in that series. It made me really happy because there was kind of a build-up of Stamets and Colbert kind of taking Adira and making them their child, which, you know, it's very kind of common in queer spaces that older gay queer people make the younger queer people their children. And so that was really cool. I thought that was really nice. And it made me happy to see them like that. There was also this one scene that has made me feel more emotion than the whole show, which was the scene where Stamets finds out that Colbert and Adira are both down on the planet and, you know, they could possibly die, and Stamets is very distraught. He realizes that his whole life, he says his whole life is down on that planet. He wants to go, he wants to save them, he wants to make sure that they're okay. And Michael Burnham says no. She puts him in an escape pod and she ejects him. It was a very powerful scene because Stamets was really, really like scared. He was worried, he was losing it, he was screaming, he was fighting with Michael, and I could feel it in my heart that he was terrified of losing his husband and his adopted child. And it was very, very powerful. It really made me feel. And that was a really good scene. Whoever wrote that scene, I want to congratulate you. You know how to play with my emotions, even though basically nothing else made me feel that much. It was really great. And it made me sad that it was also tragedy, that it was queer tragedy. If something had happened down on that planet, not counting the symbiont, 2 of those 3 people that would have died would be queer. So, yeah. But, you know, I still liked it. It was not amazing because nothing about this show is, honestly. It was wrapped up nicely. They didn't introduce anything new. They just kind of continued with what they had, and I thought that was a good idea. I'm glad they did that. Yeah. So now I just want to kind of say how I felt about the series, just to kind of get it off my chest. It's my video, I can do whatever I want, so I'm gonna complain about Series 3 of Star Trek Discovery. What I thought was that it was a mess. I was not a big fan of it. As I mentioned previously, there was some distrust of the show that has been building up over their last 2 seasons that really kind of came out No pun intended. I didn't trust the showrunners to take care of the characters. They already once killed off one of the gay husbands, and I was wondering if they would pull something like that with the newly introduced trans characters. I mean, they did kill one of them off. The binary trans man is dead. And even though there might be some chance of him resurrecting or something, he's still dead at the beginning. And Adira had to go through the pain of losing their boyfriend. I felt like there was a lot of bad acting direction, bad acting, multiple, just, I don't know what kind of people worked on this, but I've seen much better series. Yeah, it was just, I really don't know. I didn't like and many of it. It was, some of the characters were made so bland. Like Colbert, I don't know if any of you have noticed that too, but it felt like he was only there to give a kind of emotional support or a important quote when he needed to, but otherwise he didn't have personality really. And that was the case with multiple characters and multiple things. I really disliked also the character of Philippa Giorgio, because her only purpose was to annoy everyone, to not help during the missions that they had to try to start violence. You know, it was just, I was so happy when in the end she left. I was like, I was so tired of her. Really, like every time she had a line, it was just something snarky, it was something hateful, and it was so annoying. Truly, so annoying. And also the way she left this Garden of Forever, I actually found out that it's from the original series, and I didn't know that, and it felt weird for a moment, but then I realized that I haven't seen that episode of the original series, so I don't know. But it might have worked in the original series, but it didn't work in Discovery, because Discovery takes itself so seriously, and to suddenly have this kind of silly thing happen, it just feels out of place, you know? Like in the last few episodes, like the last 3 episodes, when Michael Burnham and Colbert and Saru go down on the planet, and later Adira too, they go down on the planet and they are kind of transformed into different species. That was kind of the goofy thing that would have been nice in a previous series of Star Trek, you know, like in The Next Generation or whatever. Some silly things would happen like that, but it just didn't work in Discovery, because Discovery was taking itself so seriously, and it just felt like it didn't fit there. When they all became different, or they looked like a different species, I thought that would be really funny or really cool if it had been foreshadowed in a way, because they just went down on the planet and ooh, suddenly there's this thing. What if they have, I don't know, picked up some kind of field or whatever? That would have been nice. And also if Discovery didn't take itself so seriously. I thought it was a good idea, but it was just executed very, very terribly. Yeah, and I generally felt like there was too much going on in the series. The show would just throw something at us and say, hey, look, isn't that cool? And there were times when I was like, wow, this is cool. You know, the show threw me something and I like this. But most of the time it was just stop. Or it would just add things to the story, to what was going on, and it was too much, and then I didn't care anymore. There is actually a video about clutter in Star Trek Discovery, which mostly talks about the second episode, but I think it applies to the whole season and the whole series. It's a really good video, so if you want to check it out, I'll put the link in the description. In conclusion, I didn't quite enjoy the trans representation in the third season of Star Trek Discovery. I thought that it would have been better if it was discussed more, if the issue of gender was talked about, if the characters had more space to express their experience with gender. We can't just always applaud representation just because characters of a certain minority are there, we have to see if those characters act like people, if they are representative of and helpful to the community that they should represent. If they're just there to be there, that's not good representation. I also think that the series in general was not very well done, not very well written, but that is true for the whole of Star Trek Discovery. It has diverged a lot from the original idea of what Star Trek was, and while it's not a bad thing to try to start new things and find new things in older things, I feel like the creators of Star Trek Discovery have missed what the core of Star Trek is about. It's not about action, it's not about flying in space, it is about society, it is about culture, it is about discovering new things, learning things. It's not about fighting in space over whatever. So yeah, that's my opinion on Star Trek Discovery. I've got to say that it was a little bit of torture to watch it all. I met the habit of watching the episode that would come out that week with a friend, and if I didn't have that habit and didn't want to see at least someone during quarantine, I'm not sure if I would have finished this series, even though there was a representation. And that was honestly the thing that I was most excited for. That's why I stuck with Star Trek Discovery, because I am honestly so done with it. I don't know if any of you agree, but I feel like the second season was just bad, and the only thing that brings me joy anymore is the gays and the queers, and that's it. So I've heard that the fourth season has been announced already. I'm not sure if I'll be watching that. It depends on what it's about, really. It's a shame, because I thought when Discovery was first announced, I was really excited because it's the first Star Trek series since Enterprise, right? So I was really excited for it, but then it's such a disappointment. Well, I don't know. Do you agree? If you like Discovery, if you think it's well written, very happy for you. Go watch that video about Star Trek and clutter if you want to. And yeah, see ya.